вновь. Вечно мы ловим чьи-то взгляды, прячем свои лица.
Ты один, аллиготер, через свою большую ПОУ. Подними меня.
Good morning, everyone. How could I not start out the show with that little clip? I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Hope you guys are all having a good morning. Hope you had a really good weekend. My weekend was pretty rough. Not going to lie. I woke up yesterday morning and I had this, like, I don't know how to describe it, like this weird pain under my shoulder blade, and it just will not go away. So I'm definitely struggling through the show today. Yesterday was pretty harsh. I couldn't even stand up straight. So today's at least a little bit better after taking a bazillion of leaves. Good morning, Allison. Hope you're having a good morning today. Not really a whole lot to talk about today because so much is just taking over the news that how can we not talk about Ukraine? And excuse me, there's some other things to talk about too. Good morning, Lori. We're going to definitely jump in and talk about Ukraine. I want to talk about what's going on with Mexico, with Canada, with Europe, and there's just so many things to get into. The Epstein files, which we still do not have, and no word about them. There's nothing going on. It's just, we're very fickle in American society. We go from one thing to the next, but we're not going to forget about the Epstein files. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. Good morning, Dusty. So lots to talk about. I'm going to be kind of winging it today. I didn't take really any notes or anything because this stuff is, I know it like the back of my hand, all this information going on with everything going on with Ukraine. And I'll tell you why, I'm glad this is why we talk so much on this show about foreign policy is because of days like this. Because while we all, of course, have so much to worry about here in our own country, in the end, it's foreign policy that controls everything. They're taking our tax money, giving it to other countries, not investing it in our own country. We all know the problems that go on here within our own country, but it's the problems that go on within these foreign policies that actually affect us the most. And for some reason, my prior co-host never could seem to grasp why I talked so much about foreign news. It is because it's really what shapes us and it leads to all things in our lives in the end. Good morning, Tammy Jerry Hoover. And as you guys know, that disastrous meeting between Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and of course, Zelensky, Ukrainian president, two-man comic Zelensky. I'm going to play that video again, by the way, here in a little while for anyone that missed it. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what I believe is the impending war against Europe. I think it's coming, and I don't think there's anything we can necessarily do to avoid it. But at the same time, look, there was a time under the Democrat regime when we thought there was an impending war against Russia, and there wasn't much we could do about that. Now, who would have ever thought, fast forward to Donald Trump's term, that we may be either neutral or siding with Russia in a war against Europe. So that'll be interesting to see, of course, how things play out in that direction. Hopefully neutrality is where we'll stand, but we will find out sooner than we may want. Good morning, Mr. Parno. So those are, something I want to get into, especially it would be awfully strange being at war with both Mexico and Canada. And we're going to get into that. And that, that's pretty much the topics I'm going to talk about today. Lindsey Graham, man, that guy is a traitor. He is a traitor. I just don't get him. We're going to talk about the kickbacks that Judge Jeanine Pirro posted this weekend about the members of Congress and the kickbacks that they're receiving. And we all knew this was going on. I feel like this is the show of validation because all of these things we know. Every time I see a news story, I'm like, well, we already know that. Very rarely do I see something in the news that we don't already know. But at the same time, it's great to see that validation come through and think, okay, we know it. Now they're talking about it. Now other people who don't know do know. And, and that's what it's all about. It's about waking up the people who don't know. As you can see, I'm kind of a mess today. I can barely, whatever is going on, I can't really move my right arm that well. So I'm definitely struggling. And I think it's like, I don't know if it's my lungs or if it's, I guess it's probably muscular, but whatever it is, it's like I'm like right by my right lung. And I am definitely struggling with it. And oh, and while I'm thinking about it, I will not have a show tomorrow. Duty calls, I have to work, unfortunately. So I will not be here tomorrow. I will be here on Wednesday with Colonel Joe Adams and a Thursday and Friday. Next week, I will not be in on Wednesday. I'm going to have to talk to Colonel Adams about rescheduling a day with him. I know he's got lots to talk about. We're going to let him run with it this Wednesday and see what's on his mind. I bet it's a lot. I bet it's a lot. So we'll be talking to him. Lots, there's so much going on. There's so much, things escalate so quickly that we go from 0 to 60 in about 2 days. So we'll see how all that works out. Good morning, Kim. So let's just go back to Zelensky, because we're going to be talking a lot about Ukraine and Russia on the show today. And we talk about it a lot anyway, and I'm glad we do. I am so glad that we have talked as much as we have about Ukraine. I know people get tired of hearing about it, but at the same time, thankfully, we do talk about it, because now, if you're listening at least to this show, you understand what's going on. And a lot of people in the world really have no idea what exactly is taking place. And so we know that Donald Trump had the meeting with Zelensky, which Zelensky insisted on, by the way. He absolutely insisted on meeting with Donald Trump in person. And I'll tell you, you guys probably recall a couple weeks ago, we talked about this situation where Donald Trump was on the phone with Putin. Simultaneously, we had U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in Ukraine sitting at a table with Zelensky. This was going on at the same time. And so while Donald Trump was talking on the phone to Putin, talking about a ceasefire and a potential peace agreement, we had Scott Bessent sitting there with these papers that gave the United States rights to some of Ukraine's minerals. And again, Ukraine doesn't have a ton of minerals left. I believe 2% of their total minerals is what they now control, which I guess is still a significant amount. But the areas that Russia has seized, they took 70% of Ukraine's minerals. And if you guys recall, before Donald Trump was even president, and we talked about that on the show, Zelensky reached out to Trump through media, and not directly, but through media, because that's how he does things, through media. And he told Donald Trump, hey, if you're willing to work with me, I will give you the minerals, that we hold here in Ukraine. I mean, he put that on the table in the media probably a month before Trump was even inaugurated. And so that's always been a possibility, because before that happened, I didn't see Donald Trump having any part of Zelensky or any part of funding Ukraine. And then when that happened, I'm like, okay, well, maybe we're going to have some, a little bit of bargaining going on, because we need rare earth minerals. Because it's not that we don't have rare earth minerals here in the United States. It's just for us to get to those rare earth minerals and to mine them, it's really going to disrupt a lot. There are people, who live in areas, on top of the rare earth minerals. All these people would have to move. People aren't going to be happy about that. A lot of it's owned by ranchers, as we know from Hillary Clinton, who attempted to force ranchers off their land when she was Secretary of State. And so this has always been Zelensky's plan. He was always wanting to bargain with Donald Trump about minerals. And so now we hear, flash forward, where we have Scott Bessent sitting at the table with Zelensky with those papers. And those papers at that time stated that we will provide no security guarantees to Ukraine, but we will pay, I think it was $500 billion, I believe is what the arrangement was, for those rare earth minerals. It was a monetary transaction, and that was it. There was nothing more to it, nothing more to it. And then Zelensky sat there and said, no, I won't sign it unless you give me a security guarantee that if Russia attacks us, that you will fight on the side of Ukraine. I'm not signing these papers. So Zelensky knew he was never going to sign those papers. A huge waste of time for everyone. Donald Trump was on the phone with Putin at the time, and he said, okay, you got the deal. And he worked out an arrangement with Putin as far as they could get, in a phone call, to try to establish peace in Ukraine, and how that would look like from both ends. So that you guys probably remember us carrying on and talking about that conversation a couple weeks ago. Well, again, then flash forward again, and we have Zelensky. Immediately after that day with Scott Bessent, Zelensky immediately said, "I want to meet with Donald Trump." I'm not. He was what it was. I think he was offended. This little weird dancing man was offended because Trump sent Scott Bessent and that Trump didn't come himself. Because that's what Zelensky wants. He wanted Donald Trump to meet with him in person. He wants all the attention. He wants to act like he's a big boy in the world of politics when we all know he's a puppet. And he's always been a puppet. The world knows he's a puppet. And there's very few people who take him seriously outside of the woke mind virus folks. And we all know who they are. And so therefore, Donald Trump was like, I'm not meeting with Zelensky. I have no reason to do that. We want to buy the minerals. That's all we want. We don't want anything else. We're not giving them any type of guarantee. And at one point, Donald Trump had even stopped all aid to Ukraine and then backtracked on that and started allowing a little bit of aid to come into Ukraine. Now, of course, today, Donald Trump is going to be meeting with his cabinet to discuss stopping all aid to Ukraine at the midst of all of this taking place, which if you were watching that news coverage, that turned into a really, really ugly story, a really ugly story. And Ellison, always ahead of me, I read that Anthony Blinken, Susan Rice, and two others advised Zelensky not to sign the minerals deal. That is absolutely true. And we're definitely going to work our way to that. And so we all saw that disastrous meeting at the White House the other day in the Oval Office. Zelensky being just extremely disrespectful to not only to Donald Trump and JD Vance, but literally to everyone in the room. First of all, we have this guy, and I've talked about this so many times because I think it's so disrespectful that he wears his little Ukrainian tracksuit, his war tracksuit, to all of his meetings with world leaders. I mean, this guy, I think he has such a big ego, and I don't know why. And I get it. He probably developed that from being a comedian and dancing around with his genitals out and stuff like that. But I don't understand it. And a lot of this is about his ego. And so therefore, he comes in, he wears his little war tracksuit. The guy's never spent a day in any type of combat. We all know he was placed there by the Obama administration. We're going to talk about that too, because not only in 2014 was Zelensky placed into that position by the Obama administration, but we were running their government at that time, training their police, training their military. So we, the United States, have been operating and running Ukraine, with Zelensky as the face, a lot like how our presidency in the United States has been. We have the deep state really running the government, and then we have that little puppet that's usually up on the stage pretending to be president, which is, of course, Donald Trump has been our only real president in quite some time, maybe as long as I've been alive. Good morning, Rob. Good morning, Monica. The tracksuit drives me crazy. Me too, Monica. It's so disrespectful. And then Zelensky met with King Charles yesterday, and King Charles, and so that was, and he wore that same stupid little tracksuit. And it's like, and I'm so glad if you saw the video coverage that day when he was at the Oval Office, when he arrived, one of the reporters asked, like, you're here at the United States, you're meeting with Donald Trump, and why don't you have a suit? Do you own a suit? I don't think the guy owns a suit. I've never seen him in a suit. He's always wearing that stupid tracksuit. And, usually it's green or army green. Now, this time it was black. I guess that's the fancy version. And even Donald Trump made fun of him. I think things kind of started off on a bad foot. If you watch the video coverage, I almost felt like Donald Trump was trolling him the entire time, because Donald Trump and his staff, his cabinet, they understand what Zelensky is about. They understand. And we all watched that video and we saw the situation escalate. And good morning, Karen. Karen says, I had to watch it twice because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Exactly. Good morning, Karen and Dottie and Rob. Good morning. And so it's crazy. And so he's sitting there in his little tracksuit, and a lot of people didn't catch this, but he said the word suka. I guess I can say that since it's in Russian. That's the word, the Russian word for bee. He called him a big bee to Vance, and no one caught it at the time. Now they since know, but no one caught it at the time, except for some astute listeners, who were watching. I'm not going to play it today. I put it on my Facebook page and on my X account, just a little clip of him saying that. Well, how disrespectful can you be to come into the Oval Office and talk to our vice president in that way and to constantly interrupt President Trump? What do you think of yourself to be able to do something like this? And you saw the folks that were traveling with Zelensky, looking around like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's doing this. They just couldn't believe it. And Mr. Barnow Newsmax posted, he is now ready to sign a deal with Trump after, of course he is. Well, the word is that as soon as that little outburst took place, you saw Donald Trump rush everyone out, and Donald Trump literally kicked Zelensky out. He told him he had to leave. They had a big luncheon planned. He's like, nope, you got to go. So they escorted him out to his car. And I didn't see this myself. Somebody says you could see like a little hand pushing Zelensky into the car. I didn't see that. And I watched it a couple of different times. I don't know if that's true. And whose hand it would be, I also don't know. But apparently he wouldn't get in the car at first. They said he was like looking over the top and looking around, probably the cocaine. And then as soon as he left, I heard that he just parked down the road a bit and he was calling back to see if he could get back into the White House and apologizing and groveling. And of course, Trump is like, no, your days are over, buddy. And that was the end of that. But then they canceled the luncheon. The White House staffers ended up eating the food that had been prepared for this big meeting. But here's the thing, Zelensky never planned on signing those papers. He wanted to meet with Donald Trump in person. He wanted all of this to be on camera because he thinks that the majority of Americans support him, which is just not true. And in fact, it's far from true. There are people who do, and I understand the people who do, but it's not the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans think we've given, even some of the supporters of Ukraine, of Zelensky, think we've given them far too much money. $350 billion under Joe Biden, in fact. And so therefore, he knew he wasn't going to sign those papers. This was all just a big show. And as Allison had mentioned, prior to Zelensky's meeting with Donald Trump, he went on to have a meeting with some anti-Trump Democrats. I've got photos, I've got videos of it. There were a number of folks sitting around the table talking to Zelensky, telling him, hold strong, tell Donald Trump what you want, and demand that you get these security guarantees or don't sign the deal. That's a violation of the Logan Act. The Logan Act states, and the reason why the Logan Act was put into place is to make sure that people without presidential authority didn't influence foreign matters. And that's exactly what was taking place here. Everyone in that room that day violated the Logan Act. And, not that that's unusual. I don't recall anyone being punished for that. Remember Obama? He violated the Logan Act pretty much every month when Donald Trump was president in the last term, because if you recall, when Donald Trump had a meeting with a world leader, Obama would fly in ahead of Trump and meet with that world leader and impose whatever his viewpoints were before Donald Trump arrived. He was always undermining him. And so he violated the Logan Act quite often. Now, we probably won't see anything come of this, unfortunately. I would love to see arrests and accountability. I'm starting to wonder that maybe we'll never see arrests and accountability for anything, but we'll see. We're early. It's early. I mean, what is it today? March the 3rd? Early in Trump's administration. We got a long way to go. But either way, Zelensky never planned on signing that agreement. He wants into NATO. He's made that very clear. He will not. He even said yesterday when he was over in Europe meeting with King Charles and some other folks that he will never agree to a ceasefire. He will never end the war unless he becomes a member of NATO. And, I said for the longest time that would never happen. And I'm starting to wonder now, as the division between the United States and Europe grows, Western Europe. I really am starting to think that they may end up giving him NATO membership. I hope it doesn't happen, because there's your World War III for you right there. I hope it doesn't happen, but he never planned on signing those forms that day, those letters, that agreement. Never did he plan to do that. He's just a big dog and pony show is all that was. And it backfired on him. And then, he went over to Europe directly after. And of course, they all support him. They all support him. They all want to stand behind him. Dottie says, no rules anymore. It's a free for all. It sure feels that way. Kim says, the weasel has some nerve calling a Marine a witch. Yes. With a B, yes. And he has lost his mind. You better believe it. Allison says it was easy for Zelensky to get money every time he visited the White House was Biden was present, because he had all the goods on the Biden family. And that's exactly right. We all remember Burisma, and we all know exactly how corrupt Ukraine is. And so, I'm watching this meeting unfold. And unfortunately, I couldn't watch it in real time because I was working. I had to catch up a little bit later. And when I saw it, I thought, man, what disrespect. And then what's crazy is that most of the people in the United States, for sure, don't understand that this has been something ongoing, that Trump has already tried to work a deal with Zelensky, and he just absolutely refuses. He has made it so clear that he does not want peace. In fact, you may or may not know this, but last night, while we all slept, Ukraine attacked Russia and hit them with several drones quite far into Russia, hit one of their petroleum companies, which is on fire right now. It was a very serious situation, and a huge escalation. And what will come of that yet, I don't know. I just don't know. And I know, pretty much at the same time, we had Russia hit a ship that was bringing in, arms and weapons and things from Europe. So there's still a lot going on, and this situation is escalating. This is not quieting down. It is escalating. I've been warning people for weeks now, that we, the United States and Europe, are at odds. We no longer have the same goals, because their goals were Obama and Biden's goals. They were the deep state goals. That's not Donald Trump's goals. And Europe knows, and they're starting to prepare for a war, against the United States. They're preparing. And I'm not saying a war is going to happen, because they would lose. And I think they know they would lose. And they don't really have anyone decide with them, because we were the superpower. If we withdraw from NATO, which I'm gonna say we are definitely going to withdraw from NATO sooner rather than later. If we withdraw from NATO, then NATO will collapse. There will be no NATO. We're funding it by 70% of the money coming into NATO is from the United States. So without the United States, there is no NATO. And I'm pretty sure that Donald Trump sees, if I see it, I know he sees it long before I saw anything of this division that's taking place. And now we're in a situation where Europe is arming up. They've announced that they're going to make sure that they're going to arm Europe. They want to make sure that Western Europe is prepared for war, and they're putting a lot more money into their defense budget. They're putting everything they have into Ukraine, and they know that that's going to go against the United States. We are absolutely not going to fight for Ukraine. That is never going to happen. And they're trying to entrap us, is what they're doing, because according to some NATO law, if Europe ends up in a war against Russia on Ukraine's behalf, we, the United States, are obligated to join. But that's why I know we have no choice but to withdraw from NATO. It is going to happen. I don't know when, sooner probably rather than later. It is going to happen. So be prepared for that. I think most people here, would agree. And so where things stand now is that we've got some decisions to make. I got some video clips, to show you guys, but we've got some decisions to make. Are we going to, we are for sure going to work out a deal with Russia. As a matter of fact, Pete Hegseth, I never say it right. I don't know for sure if it's Hegseth or Hegseth. Pete Hegseth he has already today stopped our program, our operatives, trying to think of the right word for it, cyber operations against Russia has already stopped. He stopped that today. Donald Trump escalating and speeding up his next meeting with Putin. They're going to meet directly, possibly in Moscow, is what I'm hearing, because things are going to escalate from here very quickly. And we have Europe, just they're ready. We have Canada, believe it or not, jumping in the mix. I think we're going to end up in a war, in a crazy situation that takes place where we have Canada to our north who's siding with Europe and against the United States. We have some new information about the war on cartels, where we are preparing for military action against the cartels. That's going to happen pretty darn quick, and so there's a lot going on. But before we get to Mexico, but see, Robert, you said Heg Seth, but still, is it Heg or Hedge? That could be either way. I'm thinking it's Heg Seth. I never can say it right. I couldn't say it right even if I knew. Beatrice says, I sure hope that we pull out of NATO. Beatrice, we have no choice at this point to pull out of NATO. I mean, we have no choice. If we don't pull out of NATO, we will be in a war. We will have no choice. There's no way around it. And with NATO siding with Zelensky, two things are going to happen. Either NATO is going to collapse when we withdraw, and we may have to withdraw to force it to collapse because they can't survive without us. Or we're going to have to, or maybe NATO will somehow bring Ukraine in, and they'll get some of that money, and they'll just have more kickbacks, and they'll all carry on amongst themselves. But the deep state, they want war against Russia. They always have. We knew that, and they were trying to do it before Trump took office. Remember? They were pulling out every stop, trying to. Remember, we used to call it poking the bear, constantly poking at Putin, trying to get him to escalate. But Putin's a smart man. He was waiting for Donald Trump to take office because he knew Donald Trump would end much of the silliness that was going on. But they did. They tried to start that war before Donald Trump took office. And thankfully, Putin had some poise and he knew to hold it out, and Zelensky, that man doesn't care. He just does not care. And it's a corrupt country. And that's where I'm going to start with some of this. It is a corrupt country. If you recall the
and U.S. advisors
what they were talking about, sorry, I didn't mean to play that. I did not mean to play that. Sorry. For anyone who's just joining the show, I hurt I don't know what I hurt. I woke up yesterday morning and I have something going on like in my right shoulder, like in my back. And I'm having a really hard time moving my right arm and hand. And so I'm kind of struggling today. So I might hit some wrong buttons because I'm having some problems. But I want to show you this first of all. This is Ursula von der Leyen. She is the chairperson of the European Union. We talked about this a little bit on Friday, and this is why we, the United States, will never, under Donald Trump, be an ally of Europe. It is not going to happen. We've got to get it through our heads that partnership is over. We are forging new roads ahead. And we're going to listen to her. I told you guys on Friday how she was talking about free speech is a virus. Well, I'm going to play a clip of her stating exactly this. And then you're probably going to feel, if you don't already, how I feel, and that the woke mind virus has taken over Europe, the European Union, and there's no going back from here. There's no going back until the people in Western Europe rise up against their government, which is going to happen also sooner rather than later. They will rise up because they see themselves being cannon fodder over in Ukraine. So they will eventually rise up. But until then, we have to deal with these folks. This is Ursula von der Leyen, again, the chairperson for the European Union.
And finally, it takes results. As technology evolves, we need to build up societal immunity around information manipulation. Because research has shown that pre-bunking is much more successful than debunking. Pre-bunking is basically the opposite of debunking. In short, prevention is preferable to cure. Perhaps if you think of information manipulation as a virus, instead of treating an infection once it has taken hold, that is debunking. It is much better to vaccinate so that the body is inoculated. debunking is the same approach. Because disinformation relies on people passing it on to others. It is essential that people know what malign information's influence is and what the techniques are that are behind it. And as the knowledge goes up, our chances of being influenced goes down.
Now, I want you to understand that we are the virus she's speaking about. That would be us. We are the virus. What we say is misinformation. I am, the queen of misinformation on this show. And so therefore, their belief system, and this is again the person who represents the European Union, she believes that we should all be censored because everything we say is misinformation. And therefore, you have to tackle misinformation ahead of time. She said you have to do it ahead of time because it's too late afterwards. The information has already spread at that point. And the censorship that's taking place right now in Western Europe is beyond ridiculous. Look at Germany. Look at the UK. They're putting people in prison for years because they talk about the same things we talk about. They do not have the freedom of speech in Europe. And I'll tell you what, that is the opposite of us. It's the opposite of what Donald Trump stands for. And for me, that clip should tell you every single thing you need to know. And that is, these people are not our friends. They are not our allies. And we are going to draw the line in the sand. And we are no longer, it's already happened. We are no longer going to be the ally of Europe. Instead, they are going to be fighting against us. Maybe not necessarily in a combat situation, but possibly. But they are going to be going against us, fighting against us, creating policy against us. Here we have the United States. We're trying to do our best to create peace between Ukraine and Russia. Donald Trump, a great negotiator, had a pretty good plan in place where, which of course a ceasefire was never going to last. They never do. We all know that, and that's exactly why Donald Trump will not give that security guarantee to Ukraine, because it's a trap. That's all it is. It's a trap. So if you're out there thinking, oh, we should back up Ukraine, we should at least give them this peace agreement so we can end this war. It's a trap, and it's a deep state trap, because we know that the deep state wants war with Russia. So what's going to end up happening if we were to give them that peace agreement, which we will never do? If we were going to do that, what would happen is we already know. Now, all of a sudden, the UK is announcing, oh, we're sending British troops, boots on the ground to Ukraine. Well, if you watch this show, we've known that for what, a month now? We've been talking about that for a long time. That's not new news. That didn't happen because of this meeting in the Oval Office. They were already going to do that. They were always going to send troops from Britain and from France into Ukraine. That had nothing to do with this meeting with Zelensky. We've talked about that several times. And what they wanted is that they say their troops are going over there for peacekeeping reasons. And we know that if we gave them some type of guarantee that if Russia, had some type of attack on Ukraine and some of these British or French troops were injured or killed, that we, the United States, would join in the war. That's the agreement they want. And that is never going to happen. It is never going to happen. Good morning, Phyllis. And Jay says, NATO is like the Democratic Party. It's no longer an organization that it once was. It's led by the elites. Yeah, we have got to withdraw from NATO. We just need to be done with it. And here, I'm going to show a video with Keir Starmer talking about what they're going to do. Now, here's the thing, is that Europe is not prepared for war. And they would not make it through a war without the United States support. The only reason why Ukraine has held up in the fashion that it has is because we gave them $350 billion. That's why. Because we were fully supporting this war against Russia, a proxy war against Russia. And so without us, Europe, they don't have the funds, they don't have the money, but now they're making a deal to send missiles. This is why it's not peacekeeping. People say, oh, they're just going over to keep peace. This is not a peacekeeping mission. They're calling it peacekeeping, but it's not peacekeeping. They're sending missiles to Ukraine. That's part of the plan, is to send missiles. So let's hear what Keir Starmer has to say. And, talk about Nazis. That's what you're going to be watching right here.
First, we will keep the military aid flowing and keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia to strengthen Ukraine now. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must be at the table. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities to deter any future invasion. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing. We're working with the US on this point after my meeting with President Trump last week. And let me be clear, we agree with the President on the urgent need for a durable peace. Now we need to deliver together. Finally, we agreed that leaders will meet again very soon to keep the pace behind these actions and to keep working towards this shared plan. We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead, and to unite around a new plan for a just and enduring peace.
All right, so I hope that you heard the key words here. And the key words were, we're going to guarantee peace for Ukraine. I hope you understood that, what that means. And he misspoke, because we, the United States, we're not sending our sons and daughters to Ukraine. That is not going to happen. And if Donald Trump ever agreed to that type of plan, I'll tell you what, he would have most of the people who voted for him turn against him on a dime. That would be it for Donald Trump. We Americans would never agree to our sons and daughters going to Ukraine and fighting for Ukraine. And regardless of whatever Keir Starmer says, I can guarantee you that is not the guarantee Donald Trump made. It is not the guarantee. Under no circumstances is Donald Trump going to send United States troops over to Ukraine to protect their peace. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And if it did happen, this show would change drastically, because I would no longer be a supporter of Donald Trump. And I don't think most of us would. And I think Donald Trump knows this. I think he understands the situation far more than any of us do. And there is no way he's going to send troops over there. Now, they're going to send planes. They're going to send boots on the ground. They've already got a plan to send missiles. Not only are they sending missiles, they're manufacturing more missiles to send to Ukraine. This is not the end of a situation. This is the beginning of a different situation. That's all. This is just the beginning of a new war. And it was always going to come to this. Always. This was always going to happen. The problem is that it's just happening in a different way. Because had Kamala Harris won, we, the United States, would have ended up sending troops to Ukraine to fight against Russia. We would have ended up in World War III. Well, they want World War III to happen under any circumstances. And so what's going to happen next is we, the United States, we're going to have to decide, are we going to remain neutral, or are we going to join the war against Europe? Because that's where it's coming. We're either going to be neutral, or we're going to be at war with Europe and potentially with Canada, because Canada jumping in the bandwagon, and Canada now is talking about sending troops over to Ukraine. I know a lot of Canadians, I don't think any of them would support that decision. And of course, Trudeau, his time is limited. He's going to do whatever he can to make sure that happens. And we're facing some very serious situation here with people who used to be our allies. And it's really a shame for the people in Western Europe, because these people, this isn't what they want. Do you think they want all these migrants coming into their country, raping their women, burning their businesses, protesting in the streets, kicking trash all over the place, sleeping in the middle of their roadways, robbing them? Things are out of control over in Western Europe. That's not what these people want. They're going to rise up. Do you think these people want their sons and daughters going to Ukraine? Here we have Zelensky, 700,000 deaths under his belt. He doesn't care. He doesn't care about your kids. He doesn't care about their kids. Does not care. And he said yesterday in his meeting over in Europe that he will not stop. He will not stop until his country becomes a member of NATO. That's the only way he'll ever stop fighting against Russia. And again, just a reminder that last night Zelensky ordered a very serious drone attack into Russia, attacking one of their largest petroleum companies, and it was on fire as of this morning, a very big fire. So that's a really big situation that's escalating and happening right now as we speak. And again, with Putin also attacking a shipment from Europe of weapons going into Ukraine. Things are escalating. For a while there, we thought things were going to be quiet. Now they're escalating, and this is how it was always meant to be. The deep state wanted war. They're going to get war one way or the other. It's just that now we've just got some decisions to make. And I think I know what those decisions are going to be. I'm not sure what you guys think, but we're either going to, again, have to stand alone and say we're just not part of this, and I hope that's what Donald Trump chooses to do. I don't want our sons and daughters to fight for Russia. I don't want them to fight for Ukraine. I don't want them to fight for Europe. I want them to fight for us, the United States. And our country under the Democrat regime, we've fallen into that trap so many times where we get involved in a war over what? Over what? And Ukraine is no threat to us, the United States, and they better not ever become a threat to us, the United States. Europe is no threat to us, the United States. And if they try to raise up, and they are, I know there's a term for that. What do they call that? Beating their war drums or something like that. With now Europe saying that they're going to arm Western European countries, and that's not to protect them against Russia. That's to protect them against us, the United States. That's what that's about. That's a threat to us, because right now we know they're vulnerable. And that is a direct threat to the United States. Good morning, Scott. Allison, Trump wants peace, no war. You're absolutely right. Scott says, let Europe help them. Man, we've got to stay neutral in this situation. We do. We've got to stay neutral in this situation, because this is not our war. It is not our war. Because I'll tell you what, we already have a deal with Russia on minerals with no guarantee that we will militarily assist Russia. And Russia doesn't need our help militarily. They've got it covered, and they've had it covered this entire time. They don't need our help militarily. We already got what we want. We've got a mineral deal with Russia. We don't need Ukraine. We don't need to enter a war into Ukraine, because it doesn't serve us for any purpose whatsoever. Let them all spend all their money on some crazy war that they're going to lose. And then, we'll just become stronger, because we will be working within our own country, minding our own business, becoming more self-sufficient, not only as a people, but as a country. That's what we need to do. And that's what I feel like we are going to do. And so, this war is about protecting the deep state secrets, is what it's about. We all know that. It's what it's always been about. And now that we bailed out, we're not part of the deep state and the Democrat regime. We don't have any secrets to hide. Now, Lindsey Graham must, still have some secrets. We're going to talk about him. But Europe now, they've got their dirty little secrets to hide. The organ harvesting, the bio labs, they're just hand in hand with it, with the deep state. So now they've got to pick up the torch, where we left off, under the Biden regime. So, we're going to talk about that. And before we get, I'm trying to think, where do we want to start here? Let's listen to Kash Patel first. And we're going to talk about why this is all happening. Joe Adams says, banging their shields. Thank you, Joe. I knew there was a term for that I couldn't remember. Thank you, Colonel Adams. And good morning, Sherry. Colonel Adams, I cannot wait to talk to you on Wednesday. man, we've got some stuff to talk about. We're going to listen to this clip from Kash Patel. Now, before we end the show, we're going to talk about those Epstein files. We're going to talk about war with Mexico, which is going to happen. It's going to happen any day, quite honestly. So let's listen to Kash Patel.
I've asked this Congress to investigate where has this money gone. The American people are owed that answer because it's our money. It's our taxpayer dollars.
And there's a lot of really good reason to be concerned because, the Ukraine was known as a, place of corruption, a place for money laundering.
Yeah. It's not like we sent $1 billion, as if that was even a small number to begin with, right? We've sent 100 times that to one country. I don't know how this Congress is allowed to get away with it. And Zelensky is out there. He went on the world stage and said Russia fired a rocket into Poland, which would literally be an act of war. Well, it turned out that Russia fired no such rocket. It turned out that the rocket came from the Ukraine and was fired into Poland.
And it was a mistake, basically.
If Zelensky's going to go out there and beg the world for more money and come to the U.S. and sit in the well of our Congress and say, we want more money, and then call and demand the new Speaker of the House provide more and more money, and call Mitch McConnell and say, we need more and more machinery, he needs to be more prepared about global statements that bring us to the precipice of war than doing what he did last fall with this missile attack, or this missile launch, I should say. And we just can't have full faith and trust by giving a leader $100 billion and having him say, I'm not.
I mean, that just goes to show what this is all about. I mean, we all knew what this was about. I remember when that situation happened with that missile that went into Poland, and Poland knows, when we start to divide, which is already happening, that shift, Poland is with us. They've already said, hey, we're with us. Hungary with the United States. These countries in Europe now. Sweden has taken sides already with Europe. And for Ukraine, everything is going to divide up. And this was Hungarian Prime Minister Orban. And I really like this guy. He's always got something really interesting to say. So, oh, great. Now I lost my little spot. And so he said, I will eventually know what he says. Eventually, I just had the little thing. I hate it when I do that. I'm like going through my little notes and then they get all mixed up and then I can't find anything. And somewhere here I have it. He said, this is very bad. It's very dangerous and very wrong. He said, Hungary remains on the side of peace. He said, European leaders in London today decided that they want to continue the war rather than choose peace. They decided that Ukraine should continue the war. And that's exactly what happened with that big drone attack into Russia yesterday. That's exactly what happened. And now Ursula von der Leyen, who I played the video of, who also the chairperson of the European Union, who also said that free speech is a virus. Remember that video from a couple minutes ago? She said that on March 4th, the European Union will present a plan to rearmament of Europe. And they're going to step up mass production of weapons, of arms to protect themselves. From who? From us. That's who. They're making a pretty unveiled threat to Donald Trump, saying, hey, you're not coming after us because we're going to be prepared. Well, they better step it up because they're not prepared. Allison, Europe does not want to send their soldiers. They want America to send soldiers. Well, Allison, they definitely will be sending their soldiers. What they want, I'm not sure that it matters, but that is their plan. And we are not sending our troops over. They are not going to lure us into that trap. It's just not going to happen. And then we have Lindsey Graham. Look at this traitor. We're going to talk about how much money did he get for these speeches. Listen to this.
2017 will be the year of offense. All of us will go back to Washington and we will push the case against Russia.
Ми всі повернемося до Вашингтону і ми будемо відстоювати санкції проти Росії.
Enough of a Russian aggression.
Досить вже російської агресії.
It is time for them to pay a heavier price.
Час вже, щоб вони заплатили важчу ціну.
I believe you will win. I am convinced you will win, and we will do everything we can to provide you with what you need to win. We will do everything we can to provide you with what you need to win.
We will do everything we can to provide you with what you need to.
Free or die.
Free or die.
Yeah, and
Now
look
we
what
are
happened
free.
there.
Yes.
And we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
It's the best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
Did you hear that? The best money we've ever spent watching Russians die. From our very own Lindsey Graham. He's not one of us now, is he? Now, of course, after that meeting, that disaster meeting at the Oval Office the other day with Zelensky, you know, Graham came out and said, hey, Zelensky, you need to resign. You need to step down. And Zelensky had a pretty ridiculous answer for that. And of course, he told Lindsey Graham where to go. And in fact, Zelensky, you guys probably saw this clip, when one of the reporters over in Europe asked him over in the UK about Donald Trump, he said, F Trump, very clearly. And I think Trump is going to F him back today. Trump right now, by the way, in a cabinet meeting to discuss ending any type of support for Ukraine. And today is going to be a big day. It's where the line is drawn between the United States and Europe. There's a lot of decisions that are going to be made today. So think about this. You just heard those. You just heard those videos with Lindsey Graham. I used to love that guy. I can't stand him anymore. You know what? He got paid. Lindsey Graham got paid $82 million to say that. Did you know that? $82 million. Your tax money that went to Ukraine, a portion of that went to Lindsey Graham, $82 million to Lindsey Graham for his support of Ukraine. Joe Biden, $92 million for his support of Ukraine. Nancy Pelosi, $86 million for her support of Ukraine. Mitch McConnell, $89 million. Chuck Schumer, $66 million. Mitt Romney, $71 million. John Cornyn, thank God he wasn't Speaker of the House. We'd be in a world of trouble. $41 million. Adam Schiff, $62 million. Dan Crenshaw, $20 million. Elizabeth Cheney, $77 million. And get this one, Kevin McCarthy, $42 million. These numbers were posted and verified by Judge Jeanine Pirro. I didn't just pull these out of thin air. These are the folks who got big, big kickbacks from our support of Ukraine. Now, why has Lindsey Graham changed his tune? You might ask yourself, oh, now he wants Zelensky to step down. Why? Because the kickbacks have ended. He has nothing more to gain from supporting Ukraine. His deal is over. No more money. Yes, Robert, they are all a bunch of traitors. Annette says, Graham is in the hot seat with Donald Trump. You better believe it. He is a criminal. Man, I would love to see all these people in Gitmo. You know, I don't care if they're Republicans or Republicans. I hate Republicans in Congress as much as I hate the Democrats. And I have no problem saying that. You know, look how many Republicans were on this list getting money. Your tax dollars. That's not money Ukraine's paying them. That's money you're paying them. They sign these big spending bills, and then they just get these kickbacks. That's how they all become wealthy. Well, the gravy train's over. You know, the theft from the American people is over. And Lindsey Graham knows this. Oh, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut before I have the FBI knocking on my door. Can't stand that guy. Linda, good morning, Linda. Linda says, no longer a fan of Lindsey Graham. Since the last midterm election, he cost us seats. Oh, I can't stand that guy. I would never wish any harm come to him, you know, but he, you know, or anyone for that matter. But he's one of those people that stands up and he wants, you know, it's so funny how fast it changed. Money changes a lot, doesn't it? If Kamala Harris had won, Lindsey Graham right now would be standing on a podium somewhere saying, yes, let's send troops over to Ukraine. Let's send them. You know, well, how about we send you, Lindsey Graham, over to Ukraine? Let's send your family over, because I'll tell you what, my son's not going and fighting for Ukraine. That is not going to happen. And I don't think you guys are going to let it happen either. And I'll tell you one thing again, as much as I love Donald Trump and love his policies, if he decided, like Keir Starmer said, which I know is a lie, that Donald Trump made an agreement to send United States troops to Ukraine, I wouldn't support him anymore. That would be the end of my support. And you know, I hope it never comes to that. And I don't think Donald Trump would ever send United States troops over to Ukraine as any part of any peacekeeping mission, because he's smart. He knows that's a trap, because he knows as soon as we sent our troops over there that your Ukraine under Zelensky's orders would immediately, you know, fire some missiles or some drones into Russia, and then we'd all be in a big war, which is exactly what they want. They just want a war. And Robert, rope necklaces, one size fits all. You know, it's upsetting to me that things have turned out the way they have turned out. You know, it really is. And I want to show you this video again. I played this at the beginning of the show. Annette says, Graham is a warmonger. Yes, I quit liking Graham when he showed his true colors. Yeah, his true colors are what? What did I say? His true colors are worth $82 million. That's what his true colors are. $82 million. That's just from Ukraine. What's he getting in the kickbacks from some other stuff? And I want to show you guys once again. I played this at the beginning of the show, and I'm going to play it again, because this is what this is all about right here.
Вечно мелодии, чьи-то взгляды, прячем свои лица. Ты один, аллиготер, через свою большую ПОУ. Подними меня разок, не развяжется твой ПУ. Не ходи, ты в избирком, там тебя посадят РАКом.
Puppet. That's just a puppet. That's all that is. That's a puppet. I'm not going to play this whole clip. I just want to prove my point here that we, the United States, under the deep state, we actually run and have ran Ukraine. And so we put the policies in place there. It was always about disturbing Russia, putting NATO in Ukraine along Russia's borders. We wanted, you know, a war with Russia for a long time. I'm not going to play this whole clip. It's only a minute long anyway, but it just goes to show that we, the United States, under Obama, we are the people who instilled not only Zelensky as the puppet president, but we also trained their police forces. We have Americans in their ministry, in their cabinet. We're running the show. We have been for a long time.
Advisors serve in almost a dozen Ukrainian ministries and localities, helping to deliver services, eliminate fraud and abuse, improve tax collection, and modernize Ukrainian institutions. With U.S. help, newly vetted and trained police officers are patrolling the streets of 18 Ukrainian cities. In courtrooms across Ukraine, free legal aid attorneys funded by the U.S. have won 2/3 of all the acquittals in the countries. Treasury and State Department advisors have helped Ukraine shutter over 60 failed banks and protected the assets of depositors. And since there can be no reform in Ukraine without security, over $266 million of our support has been in the security sector, training 1,200 soldiers and 750 Ukrainian National Guard personnel.
Okay, well, that can go on. Victoria Nuland, that speech goes on for quite a while, and it names off. And this was money that we spent. This is not part of the $350 billion that we sent over there. This was other money that we sent over before that. So we are Ukraine. The deep state is Ukraine. That's their little utopia over there. Their little separate territory in which they do all their dirty deeds, as we all know. That's what we all know. But you know what? Would they go? This is the last thing I'm going to say about Ukraine, and then we're going to move on and talk about the war with Mexico and a couple of other things. But I want to add this in. Is it possible? Now, we've talked about this before on the show. Other people are starting to talk about it now and probably have mentioned it before. But is it possible that Zelensky ordered the assassination of Donald Trump? Is that possible? Wesley Ryan Roush, of course, we talked about it at the time. He was the guy with the gun hiding out at the golf course. Remember that? In Bedminster. I mean, that's just insane. Or was it at I keep saying Bedminster. I think that was in Mar-a-Lago. I always get confused as to where that was. And he is the guy who attempted to take out Donald Trump. Now, we know what his ties are to Ukraine. He spent a lot of time at Fort Bragg. He spent a lot of time in Ukraine. He lived in Ukraine at one point. And we know that he hired mercenaries for the Ukrainian government. So, he was hand in hand. If you guys remember Matt Levelsberger, the guy who was blown up, blew himself up, I should say, as hard as that is to say, in Las Vegas at the Trump Tower. Well, they worked, kind of hand in hand. Whether they knew each other, we don't know. But what we do know is that they were both hiring mercenaries for Ukraine. And you can't tell me there isn't some kind of connection there. And I'm kind of glad that Donald Trump is, picking up on this. I've got 2 videos here of Tucker Carlson. So we're going to walk through these and switch topics here. We've talked about Ukraine for the entire show now for a whole hour. But we have to talk about it because there's a lot going on with Ukraine that's only going to escalate today and in the coming days and weeks. So
against the Republican nominee, the former U.S. President, Donald Trump, that guy has been interviewed countless times by every big media outlet in the United States. He's got, a criminal record the length of your arm, 20 charges, including possession of weapons of mass destruction. The New York Times didn't bother to learn any of that before they held him up as a freedom fighter in Ukraine, where he was living. And then the piece describes the contact he's had with members of Congress and their staffs and other U.S. government agencies. And you're like, wait a second, that's the same guy who brought a rifle with a scope to a golf course in South Florida to murder Donald Trump, and he's had all these contacts with U.S. government agencies? Like, I don't know what that's about, but I think it's time to find out. No? Yes.
Yes, it is absolutely time to find out. I know Donald Trump is looking into it. He posted that video. Donald Trump posted that video himself. Did Zelensky order the assassination of Donald Trump? It's quite possible. I think Trump believes that he did. And, we're going to see, Donald Trump's going to get to the bottom of that. Things are going to escalate very quickly, very quickly. If you're just joining the show, we've been talking about the growing animosity between Europe, Western Europe, and the United States, and how we're going to have to decide, do we remain neutral or do we end up in a war with Europe? I could see a lot of things happening in that direction. I can't wait to talk to Colonel Joe Adams about this on Wednesday, because I know he's got some good insight into what's happening. And I've been talking for weeks now about that growing wedge between us and Europe and how our goals are no longer aligned. And some of the things we also talked about today was the United States withdrawing from NATO. We will withdraw from NATO. We absolutely will withdraw from NATO, probably sooner rather than later. It is going to happen. And when we withdraw from NATO, NATO will probably collapse. So does it really matter, anymore if Zelensky gets NATO membership, if NATO is obsolete? We give 70% of what NATO was from the United States. When we withdraw, Europe, they won't be able to hold up. They need us far more than we need them. So those are some things that are going to play out. Todd says, we remain neutral, but pipelines can always disappear magically like they have in the past. And that's one thing we've got kind of, I was mentioning earlier, Canada, Trudeau talking about sending their troops into Ukraine also in this. They keep saying peacekeeping. Once again, I'll remind you, when you have, airplanes in the sky, when you're relocating missiles, giving Ukraine missiles, and when you're announce you're manufacturing more missiles to send to Ukraine, that's not peacekeeping. That is anything but peacekeeping. That is an escalation. And that is what Europe is doing. We played the video from Keir Starmer earlier saying exactly that. That is an escalation. Let's switch gears. We've talked about Ukraine for a long time today. We're going to talk about it more. Like I said earlier, I'm glad that we talk about this situation with Ukraine and Russia. I've been talking about it for many years now, since 2012, actually. And so, it's all a consistently changing situation. I'm glad we've talked about it because, now when you see people out there spreading their lies and disinformation, the truth. And that's the most important weapon you have, is knowing the truth. Now, what about these Epstein files? Isn't it kind of interesting? The same day we were expecting accountability for the lack of files, that just happened to be the day that Zelensky had this ridiculous meeting in the Oval Office. And no, I purely coincidental, in my opinion. A lot of people calling for the resignation of Pam Bondi, Attorney General Pam Bondi, over this because they think that she's dumb. I don't think she's dumb. They think that she misrepresented the files to the American people. We talked about all this on Friday at great length, that she came out, they're all dancing around. Oh, we got the files. Woo. And then she made an announcement that said, yes, I thought that these 120 pages was it. I thought I had the complete file because the FBI told me I had the complete file. They told me this is all there was. I don't know how she could have ever believed that. I mean, it does make me raise suspicion a little bit. Like I would have known that wasn't the complete file, but I'm not passing judgment on her. I still think she's a great attorney general. I think she'll do fantastically when she, makes her way through this current situation. But the fact is we still don't have any answers. Where are the files? Are there any files? I think they've been destroyed. I don't think we will ever find out who those names are. I really don't. And I've got a little clip of Tucker Carlson talking about it. Robert says, trade war for sure. Europe does not buy American unless they absolutely have to. Even when they have manufacturing plants, they always buy from Europe, even if more expensive. Also, Japan and Korea as well. Yeah, I heard that Europe is probably going to start sanctioning us, the United States, which is kind of funny, but it's probably going to happen.
What happened to all the evidence?
Take a listen to this.
Epstein gets arrested. They charged him for paying for massages in his New York apartment. That's all they charged him for. So why did they only charge him for that? Well, there's a reason. He had a place in New Mexico. He had his island. He had his place in Paris. He had another place, I think, in West Palm Beach. And if they had charged him for trafficking, the FBI would have had to simultaneously raid every property under a Mann Act. Instead, they arrested him. They searched the New York property. What was happening in the island? We don't know. What happened to the island? We don't know because the FBI said, well, we can't search it. So they left all these properties unattended. And then that's when the mop-up operation commenced. And they got whatever compromising CDs and DVRs and other information. And so Epstein gets charged with the lowest possible conduct that he ever could have been charged with. All their properties were left unattended. So mop-up teams went in there, took whatever they needed to take out there. And then Epstein commits suicide. It's the end of the story. What's to talk about? All gone now. It's like the ending of The Usual Suspects. It's like he never existed.
We're not going to see the list because there is no list. I'm fully convinced there is no list. The list doesn't exist. And we're not going to see the list because there is no list. There was a lot of cover up that started from day one. I think a lot of us thought that there was a piece of paper out there, a file with a name of all of the men and women who were named as the people who took advantage of minors. What adults do, I don't really care unless they were trafficked or, it was that kind of situation. I really expected, there's a piece of paper out there somewhere with a list of names that had the names of, again, all of these men and women who were part of Epstein's circle, people that requested that he supply them with children or minors or trafficked women or trafficked men. And now, I think there are files out there that Pam Bondi has not seen yet, that Kash Patel has not seen that does name names. I think they'd have to go through those files, pull the names out. And I've heard Alan Dershowitz is one of those names, and I'm not creating any type of libel because it's been published, publicly about his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. And I think the only way we're going to find those names is to do our own research. Where there's smoke, there's fire. You go back and you look at the leaks here and there about people who were associated. We know Bill Gates. Now, did Bill Gates, take advantage of young people, minors? We don't know, but we know he was a very close associate of Epstein. We know that because his former wife told us, no big secret there. Donald Trump told us that Bill Gates had lobbied the White House for days on end, day and night, constant calls, asking them not to release that information. So, but there is no information, is there? I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I don't think there is any information. I don't think there are any files. I think they got rid of everything a long time ago. I think that yes, the FBI may still have thousands of videos, thousands of pages, and if they didn't delete them all already, but I don't think it's what we're looking for. I don't think that we're ever going to find out who these people are. I really don't. There might be witnesses who name certain people, but there may be video evidence of some people being around. I don't think we're ever going to find out. I really don't. I think we will eventually find out about P. Diddy and his videotapes and who's on those, because they're probably not, outside of Obama, they're probably not big public officials. They're probably not going to be any kind of threat to our national security or destroy our relationship with Israel. I don't think we're ever going to see those names. I would like to, but look what happened. Absolutely nothing has happened. Remember how AG Pam Bondi said to the Southern District of New York, to the FBI office, to Kash Patel, I want those files on my desk by Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Remember that? Or no, was that Friday? Friday morning by 8 a.m. And nothing happened. There were no files on her desk. They gave her nothing. They completely ignored her. They have completely ignored Kash Patel. There, we have learned absolutely nothing since Friday, not one single thing. And we probably never will. So we've just got to get it out of our heads that we're ever going to know who's on that list. And it's unfortunate, and I feel like it's a big failure on the Trump's presidency for this. I still like Donald Trump. It's not that I'm going against him, but I think that we were promised names, and those names we're not getting. And as we talked about on Friday, what was released, those 120 pages, I had those pages 5 years ago, unredacted. So they just gave us what was already publicly available, and they redacted it, what we already knew. I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. I don't think Pam Bondi should resign. I think she should hold her head strong, and I think they should keep moving forward. But they can't just drop the ball. They need to explain to the American people what's going on. If they can come out and they can say, hey, the Southern District of New York, they just won't hand over the files. And so therefore, we're going to have to, take some action against them. Or maybe they can come out and tell us, hey, they've destroyed the files. There are no files. We'll never know. We regret it as much as you do. And we're going to take some action. Or maybe nothing more to know. There is nothing. We just don't know. We're never going to know. But either way, they need to have some responsibility to the American people. When you promise us we're going to have those names, we expect those names. And I want to know those names, and I'm not going to give up wanting to know. However, we're never going to find out. And Allison says yes. And you're right, Allison. We talked about that on Friday, that office is ran, I don't know if it's ran by, but that Comey's daughter is, of course, a U.S. prosecutor in that office, and she was involved with the case against Epstein, and she was involved with the case against Ghislaine Maxwell. So we're never going to find out those names. I'll be curious, though. But here's what we, the American people, need to do. I know we're all distracted with everything that's going on with Ukraine and Russia. Now we're going to be distracted with what's going on with Mexico. But I'll tell you what, we've got to hold tight. We can't just be fickle like we always have been. We've got to hold people accountable. And we need to flood the social media with requests. Where are the Epstein files? We're not giving up. We want answers. And we can't give up. We have to demand answers. What I'd like to know is, why isn't Congress demanding answers? I'm not seeing any members of Congress, those folks that we admire so much, even in the Freedom Caucus. I don't see them demanding answers. I don't see it. I don't know if you guys do. Maybe I'm missing something. I don't see it. Darlene says they are making Pam look really bad if they don't act on this. They need to shut that office down immediately and send everyone packing. I agree, Darlene, and I hope that happens. Allison says Kash Patel needs to go to the SDNY FB office. He made a statement on, I don't know if it was Saturday. I saw it over the weekend. I worked all weekend, but I have this constant feed coming through my phone where all these different posts from different sources. And I remember seeing something flash through that he said, oh, we're going there. We're heading there now. But nothing ever came of it. I never heard another word. Did they really go? Was he just saying that, or was somebody else just saying it on his behalf? I don't know, but we still stand right now where we have absolutely no answers. Karen, you have a good day also. Karen heading out from the show. So, we just got to keep on it. We just can't allow it to just be dropped like we so often do. We care about an issue and then we just drop it because something else comes along that distracts us. We have to stay on top of these Epstein files and at least demand an answer. We're never going to get those names. I think we need to just resign ourselves to that. But we at least need some answers. Where are the names? If we can't give them to us, at least tell us what happened. And please hold the people accountable. I mean, to me, that's every day. Something I feel like I come on the show every day and say, why aren't people being held accountable? That's all I want to see. I want to see people being held accountable, and I'm not seeing the accountability. Now, I'm not complaining about Donald Trump. I'm not complaining about his administration. Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, were appointed just a week before, this happened. They've still got a lot of catching up to do. And things like Elon Musk said on Friday, it's not as if you step into this position and automatically all of the power is handed over to you. It just doesn't work that way. So we've got to hold strong. We still have to support Kash Patel and Pam Bondi until there's reason not to. They're new in this position. They will get it sorted out. As for Donald Trump, I mean, the guy just got to sit in the chair, on January 20th. Also, he's making leaps and bounds in that amount of time. Illegal border crossings are on the southern border are pretty much non-existent right now. I think it's down by like 95%, which is insane. But we've got to still demand accountability. There's nothing wrong with demanding accountability. And I know I'll sit here and complain every day that we're not seeing that accountability, but I also have patience and understand that it's going to take time. I do think it's coming. Allison says names on that list will rock Wall Street. I think names on that list will rock the entire world. Not even just our country, but the entire world. I think when we start seeing those names, if we ever see those names, I think we're just going to have to play the guessing game like we've been doing all these years. But either way, we don't have a lot of time to keep going. So I want to throw this in. Now, if you've been watching this show for quite some time, then you know that we started talking about the United States going to war with the cartels over in Mexico. Gosh, the first day Donald Trump took office, because one of the first things he did when he took office was he designated the cartels over in Mexico as a terror organization. So they are all terrorists now, which gives us a lot of rights to take military action against them. And since that time, we've often, including with Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard, we've also often talked about how we, the United States, are preparing for war against the cartels. We've been talking about this for at least a month or more, and it is coming to fruition as we expected it would be. It started out with us designating the cartels as a terror organization. And from there, it went to us, Donald Trump, talking to Mexico, to their president, and saying, hey, we've got to do something about these cartels. They're trafficking people into our country, trafficking drugs. They're making billions of dollars doing that at the destruction of the United States. We've got to do something about this. They're harming our border control. They're planting IEDs in the roads, which killed a rancher the other day and another person, last week. And I'll tell you, he's right. We've got to do something about it. And then we knew that there were these reconnaissance flights, going over Mexico, mapping out the locations of the cartels and of their drug facilities and their weapon facilities and so on. Well, we knew that happened. And we thought, okay, there's probably airstrikes coming, because that's why they want to know where they're storing their drugs, where they're making the fentanyl. Well, then we announced that, hey, we're going to work with Mexico. We're going to send in our special forces into Mexico to work with the Mexican government. We're going to train the military, and we're going to train their police on how to fight the cartels. Well, we all knew that that's just a front, because we all know, that's just a nice way of putting things, that really what we're going to do is fighting the cartels. We're not going to go in there and train the drug cartels and train the police, just as we talked about with Colonel Joe Adams. The cartels, they interact regularly with the police and with the government and with the military over in Mexico. Their military already knows how to deal with the cartels. The problem is their government over there has become so corrupt that any true effort to fight the cartels has just been completely futile. I see videos all the time, I'm sure you have too, where they will have a police officer that joins the force, who's like, we're going after the cartels. And then guess what? That police officer gets assassinated in his police cruiser, driving around town. We've all seen those videos. Well, now here's a little bit more solid evidence of what we say. We can talk a lot about some stuff on this show, and we do, but we don't, usually it's me talking. We have Colonel Joe Adams that joins us and talks about it. You guys on the comment line, we talk about it. I know people look at me like I'm crazy because I'm not in the military. I'm certainly have never been in the military, but I see the writing on the wall. I read between the lines. I can see these things playing out, and I pay attention to the facts. It also doesn't help that, or doesn't hurt that I can't sleep at night. So I read every little tidbit of news. But anyway, so finally, we have a little bit more confirmation of what's taking place here. Our Pentagon chief, Pete Hegseth, said in a conversation with Mexico's top military leadership, he has threatened unilateral action if Mexico does not resolve the problem with the drug cartels. So, he says here that we're talking about a full-scale military actions against the cartel. Absolutely. And, this has been reported now today by the Wall Street Journal that we, the United States, our Pentagon chief, Pete Hegseth, is talking about full-scale military action against the cartels in Mexico. And it's my understanding, outside of what the Wall Street Journal wrote, is that we've already gotten permission from Mexico's president to carry out strikes against the cartels. That was part of the deal when we entered into Mexico. But so this again is just validation to what we already knew and what we already thought. We just didn't have any validation of it. So that's what this is our validation that we're not all crazy. we as much as you guys hear Colonel Joe Adams and I talk about, military action in Mexico and the fact that we've sent all these troops in, and now Donald Trump has ordered 3,000 more American troops, active duty troops, down to the southern border because it's about to go down. And what that's going to look like, I don't know, and I can't wait to talk to Colonel Adams about that on Wednesday. I don't know what that's going to look like. We've spent a lot of time wondering that if we're going to conduct full-scale military operations against the cartels, it's not necessarily that we're going to be at war with Mexico, but that could happen because we don't yet know how Mexico is going to feel about this situation. Obviously, anything that we do over there military-wise, we've got to make sure we don't harm civilians. But unfortunately, a lot like a terror organization, which of course the cartels are, they have families, they have children, they live in communities with innocent people. And so what do these full-scale military options look like? I'm going to guess that they're going to start out by going after these facilities where they're making drugs. This is just me talking. No one has validated this for me. I'm just thinking if it were me and I was making these decisions as a country, I would say we would go after the drug facilities first. That's number one. We've already stopped pretty much all the crossing on the southern border, very little coming through right now. So that's kind of, we've got to back that up a little bit. But then, what about our local law enforcement? Are they ready for what could potentially come our way? Because I'll tell you, if we have a full military scale war against the cartels, don't think that that's not going to affect you potentially in your own neighborhood, because we know there's a lot of cartel members in our country. And if we go to war against the cartels go to war against us. And we have to start thinking about those things and what that looks like for us inside of America. When you go to war with a country, it's not just what happens in that country, it's what happens in your own country. Are we going to have some type of attacks, from cartel members in our own communities? I don't know. We're going to ask Colonel Joe Adams about that again on Wednesday. What does that look like for us? Because I can guarantee you there are cartel members in your town. I don't care where you live. You could say, oh, I live in rural Missouri. There's no cartels here. Yes, there are. Yes, there are. And if you drive on the highway, the cartels are driving right by you. They go up and down our highways all the time delivering drugs. They just found a big shipment not too far from where I live in a big truck not too long ago. They're here. They're everywhere. Allison says, the Washington Guard is ready. I wish they were everywhere, Allison. And Allison says, great to see we are extraditing cartel members, some very close to El Chapo. Yeah, 39, or was it 29 cartel leaders we talked about, I think on Friday, being extradited into the United States. So what we got to figure out is Mexico with us or against us? We're doing a lot of that guessing game lately, aren't we? Who's with us and who's against us? Now, would Mexico benefit without the cartels? Or does their government make money on the cartels? I don't have the answers to that, quite honestly. Hopefully, maybe Colonel Joe Adams on Wednesday will have those answers. I don't know. I don't know if the Mexican government profits from cartel money. I would think that they do. I would think that the reason why the cartels have been able to survive to the extent that they have and be so powerful is because the government does make money. Cartels make billions of dollars every single week, between drug trafficking, human trafficking, and so on. Very powerful. They're actually very powerful organizations. And I think that us arresting the top leaders, Mexico arresting the top cartel leaders, extraditing them here to the United States, was to kind of cut that snake, whether they cut the head off the snake, something like that, along those lines, get them a little chaos, a little unorganization prior to our attack. And it's coming. I mean, it could happen any day. It could happen before. We have Colonel Joe Adams here on Wednesday. Because if you know how we work, whether it's under Donald Trump or Biden or Obama or whoever else it might be, we all know what's happening, or some of us know what's happening, but we don't have the validation. And by the time we have the validation, it's already happened. So that means if Pete Hegseth is already coming out and talking about full-scale military operations against Mexico, it is already happening. So is it happening today? Is it happening tomorrow? It's going to happen any day. So we need to keep an eye on that. And so those are some of the main things I wanted to talk about today. I know my time is running out. I don't think there was anything else I wanted to get into today that I can think of. So, I want to make sure that I don't think there was. I didn't take many notes today because I knew we would be talking about Ukraine so much. I don't think there's anything else I have for you guys. But either way, we talked a lot about Ukraine today. We talked about what it's going to look like when we, the United States, have to make that decision. Are we going to become solitary and neutral, or are we going to go against Europe in a war? We have to make some decisions. We have to make decisions because we don't really have a choice. We're being put on the line. Are we going to go to war with Mexico, or are we just going to go to war against the cartels? We are going to go to war against the cartels. Will Mexico be with us or against us? Europe, we're not sending troops. The United States is not sending troops to Ukraine under any circumstances. That's not going to happen. We would all revolt against Donald Trump if it did. He knows that. It's not going to happen. So when we make that decision where Europe understands that we are not sending troops over, we're not going to back Europe up. We're not going to back Ukraine. In fact, we would probably side with Russia over Ukraine if that's what we had, if we were backed into a corner. How is Europe going to, how are they going to relate to us when that happens? They've already talked again about arming all of Western Europe, and that's not against Russia, that's against us. So lots of things to think about and ponder over. And I just want to remind everyone that I will not be here tomorrow. Duty calls. I have to work. I will not be here tomorrow. I will be here Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. We're going to have Colonel Joe Adams joining us on Wednesday. Boy, we've got a lot to talk about with Colonel Adams. I cannot wait. Lots to talk about. A lot's going to unfold today and tomorrow. Even though I won't be here tomorrow to do a show, I'm still going to be keeping up with the news. I'll be posting anything to my social media. I've been stepping up my postings on X because I think that's where it's at. I think Facebook, as much as we would like to think they're with us, really aren't. So I'm kind of starting to change my pattern of doing things a little bit. If you don't have an account on X, please sign up for one. Support the folks that support us. And I'll be back on Wednesday. Next week, I will not be here on Wednesday. I'm going to have to contact Colonel Adams today to see if we can work out a deal for another day next week, because I'll tell you, his opinion is going to be very valuable in the coming weeks because there's a lot going on in foreign policy, a lot going on, a lot of things on the line. Trump has that cabinet meeting today to decide if we are going to end all support of Ukraine. Europe met yesterday to talk about how the situation looks going forward without the United States being part of NATO, because they know we're going to withdraw from NATO. And we'll hear probably a little bit more of what came out of that meeting yesterday. It sounds like what came out of that meeting was that they understand that we're going our own way. We're separating from Europe, and that they're going to have to learn to live without us. And we know their decision in learning to live without us was to go full scale into Ukraine, sending missiles, I think it was $1.9 billion to Ukraine, missiles, ramping up again the manufacturing of missiles that they're going to send to Ukraine. A lot going on. And we're seeing the countries divide. Poland, Hungary, taking our side. Norway, I believe, is going to take the side of the United States. Most of Europe will probably take the side of the UK, France definitely working against us. So those are some of the things we'll be carrying on and talking about later in the week. And we're going to keep an eye. Where are those Epstein files? We're not going to give up. We're still going to be keeping an eye on that. We're going to wonder where they're at, and we're not going to stop until we have some answers. So I do hope all of you guys have a really good week. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap, and I will look forward to seeing you all on Wednesday. Have a good day, everyone.